This is the Featherbed Journey by Paula Kurtzman-Feeder. Rachel's grandmother had a soft, warm feather pillow. Sometimes she would let Rachel sleep with it. The pillow went woof when Rachel laid her head on it. Every Passover Seder, Grandpa would sit at the head of the table and rest against the pillow. Sometimes Grandma would hug the pillow with a faraway look in her eyes. Early one windy evening, Rachel's little brother Louis came into her room. The windows were open. Rachel was punching the pillow. Smack, whack, thwack. "What are you doing?" asked Louis. "Grandma said feather pillows need lots of fresh air and exercise." "Let me exercise it," said Louis, and he grabbed the pillow. "Give it back to me," said Rachel. "No, I have it now." Louis ran downstairs. Rachel followed him down the stairs, past their mother and father, past Grandma and Grandpa, and out the door. "Oh dear, Louis has the pillow," said Grandma. She ran to the door. "Come back," she cried. "Bring the pillow back." In the coming darkness, Rachel pulled at the pillow, and Louis held on tight. Suddenly it tore. Soft little white feathers flew up in the air. "Oi, oi, no, no, no," cried Grandma, and she ran out of the house. "Rachel, Louis, catch the feathers! We must save them all." Grandpa came outside. He picked up the torn pillow. "Here," he said, "you can put the feathers back in. Hurry." The wind blew the feathers up and down and all around and around. Louis jumped up again and again, catching the feathers as they flew near him. Mom and Dad ran across the street and picked up the feathers from a neighbor's lawn. The wind blew many feathers far away. The street lights went on. A few feathers floated past the yellow lights. Grandma sighed. "No more," she said. "It's too dark. This will have to do. Oh, I wish I could find them all." Grandpa put his arm around Grandma. "Remember," he said, "it's a very special pillow. We can sew it up. It's okay for it to get smaller." "Why can it get smaller?" asked Louis. "Why is it special?" asked Rachel. "Once it was a feather bed," said Grandma. "A feather bed?" said Louis. "How can you sleep on such a little bed?" "Once upon a time it wasn't little," said Grandma. "Tell me the once upon a time story, Grandma," said Rachel. "The Featherbed story." "This is the Featherbed story," said Grandma. "A long time ago I lived with my mother and father in a small town in faraway Poland. I had 2 older sisters, but they were married and I lived in another town. My mother made a feather bed. Her name was Friedel Rakowitzki. She was my great-grandmother," said Louis. "Don't interrupt," said Rachel. Grandma went on. "When I was a little girl," she said, "I slept on that feather bed, or, if it was very cold, I slept under it. It was filled with soft goose down. We had our own geese, and we plucked their down." "That wasn't nice," said Louis. "It hurt the geese." "They were loose feathers, Louis. They were easy to pull off." "Easy to pull off, but not easy to get," said Grandpa. "No," said Grandma. "First my mother had to catch the goose. She would put it in her lap and hold its head between her knees. Then she'd pick the soft, downy feathers from the neck and the breast. Flickin', we would call Yiddish, pulling the feathers. The goose would pull loose sometimes and pinch Mama's arm. It wouldn't let go. Oh, she would be black and blue for so many days." "How many feathers did she get?" asked Louis. "It took many to fill up the feather bed. 1,000 million, Mama would say. Then it was filled high with those feathers. It was finished. Then Mama would sew the covers up and sew her initials in Yiddish in a corner. On nice days, Mama would shake it out and give it some sun and fresh air. It got so puffy, I think it was at least 10 feet high. Then I would run and jump right in the middle of it. It would go woof, like air shooting out of a balloon. Just like our pillow, said Rachel. Now, tell how it became a pillow, asked Louis. Grandma took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Sad times came to us, she said. War began. Certain people from Germany called Nazis came to Poland. They didn't want the Jews in Poland. They didn't want Jews anywhere. They made Jewish people sew a yellow star on their clothes. They beat the Jews up. They killed them just because they were Jews. And, said Grandma, my papa was told not to go to his job anymore. We couldn't travel, and I wasn't even allowed to go to my school. Oh, Grandma, said Rachel, and she held her grandmother's hand. One terrible day, they made us get out of our house. We didn't have time to take very much. They drove us to the old part of the big city. It was called a ghetto. Only Jews lived there now, and they had built a wall around it. It was so crowded. 2 families lived with us in one room. It was cold that winter, and there were very little food. I was always hungry. My stomach hurt so much. I hope you took your feather bed, said Rachel. Yes, and that was what kept us children warm. 6 children shared that feather bed. Then what happened? Asked Louis. Things got worse and worse. People were dying of hunger and sickness. Sometimes Nazis came and took people away. We never saw them again. But you didn't die, Grandma, said Rachel. You were lucky. Why were you lucky? Asked Louis. Because I got out of the ghetto, said Grandma. Mama and Papa stayed behind. It was safer for only one person to escape. They said I had my whole life to live still. I was your age, Louis, 7 years old. I was scared and I didn't want to leave Mama and Papa, but Papa had a plan. He knew of a Christian farmer who might help me hide. Papa sent a secret message to this farmer and promised him some money. The farmer sent a message back. 2 nights later, with the money in my hand, I sneaked through a hole in the ghetto wall. It was cold. I missed Mama and Papa already. I was afraid I might never see them again. The farmer's name was Jan Witkowski. He met me and took me to his house. He and his family hid me and used the money to buy food for me. I hid in a secret compartment in the basement. There I stayed most of the time. I could never go outside or even look out a window because the neighbors might see me and wonder. A few times Nazi soldiers came to the house to look for hidden Jews. I was so scared. I could hear their big boots walking on the floor above me. Oh, but that was scary. What did you eat? Asked Rachel. Cabbage and cabbage and cabbage, and sometimes noodles. And I slept on a pillow filled with dried peas. Dried peas, squealed Louis. He put his hand over his mouth to keep from laughing. It's not funny, said Rachel. I'm glad I have my feather pillow, Grandma. Feather pillow, feather bed, shouted Louis. What happened to the feather bed? Did you take it with you? No. Mom and Pop and the other people who stayed in the ghetto needed it. Then my feather pillow can't be from your feather bed, said Rachel. It certainly is, said Grandma, and I'll tell you why. I stayed with Mr. Witkowski for 2 years, but one day a neighbor began to ask questions. She had seen me do something I shouldn't have done. I peeked out a window. If she were to tell the Nazis, they would kill me and the Witkowskis too. The next night, Mr. Witkowski sent me into the woods. He let some people who were hiding there know. I hid with those people for 2 more years. Other brave men and women sent us food and found us shelter. Sometimes we ate, sometimes we didn't. I wish more people had been as kind and as brave. One day, at last, the war was over, continued Grandma. All of us came out of the woods. We were sent to a camp filled with people who escaped the Nazis. And at the camp I found my mother, but I never saw my father or my sisters again. They had all been killed. Finally, after 6 months, we were allowed to go to America. We were safe at last. Everyone was quiet for a minute. Then Rachel asked, "What about your featherbed, Grandma?" Grandma smiled. After we settled down in America, she said, Mama wrote to Jan Witkowski to thank him for saving my life. We didn't even know if he was still alive. But one day, the last day of Hanukkah, when our neighbors were there to celebrate, the postman came to our house. He had a big package. It had come all the way from Poland. "A Hanukkah present," said Louis. "The featherbed," yelled Rachel. "Well, let me tell you, it was, and it wasn't." "That's a riddle," said Rachel. "What was it, Grandma?" "Shh, I said I would tell you." Inside the package was a pillow, and on the pillow was a letter. It was from Mr. Witkowski. He told us that he had helped others too. Someone gave him the feather bed to thank him. They told him it had belonged to my mother. "Finish the riddle," said Rachel. "Ah, the answer to the riddle," said Grandma. "This is what else he wrote. I remember every word." "The feather bed kept many my family warm on cold nights, but it is no more. One day during the war, fires burned in the town and in my house. Your feather bed burned too. I saved a little, enough for a pillow. I thought you might want it. Your friend, Jan Witkowski." "And that's the answer to the riddle," said Rachel. "The feather bed turned into a pillow." "Grandma, how did you know it was your feather bed?" asked Lois. Grandma carefully picked up the torn pillow. There on the corner were the initials of Grandma's mama. A few feathers floated up in the air. Grandma caught them. "It's going to be a little pillow now," said Rachel. "But always a very special pillow," said Grandma. "And now you know why."